So I think it's interesting. Are we really preparing our athletes for that type of challenge and adversity? And if they're not facing it until they're 18 years old, I think we've done them a disservice.
I'd agree with that.
They try out here.
Yeah, I wish they did. And because I always tell my players, like, you have to trust yourself that you're able to make the team. So if you're a walk-on or you're, preparing them for the college level, if they're going to Matt, doesn't matter if you're, getting the full scholarship or you're a walk-on, you still have to make the team, right? You have to trust your ability to go out and compete and beat someone else for a spot on that team, right? And like I said, I just don't think that's there. And I don't think it's there on the boys' side either in Ontario. You might pick one or two players at, sort of the bottom of your roster. But for those high-level players who aspire to, the Team Ontarios or the Team Canadas or what have you down the line, you really don't want their first provincial or national team tryout to be their first real tryout. I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Go ahead, Richard. You had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, I agree, but the structure of girls hockey in Ontario has made it possible for teams to literally tamper and steal kids from coaches in October and November. That's a real issue. So we have to work within the structure that you have to work with the hand you're dealt. So that's an administrative issue. It's a different problem. On the boys' side, and I'm not just talking about what I've seen here in the GTA, but also my experience in Montreal and in Ottawa. At the higher levels, the AA, AAA levels, teams are mostly made from the previous season. But I've seen coaches change 7 players from the previous season because it didn't work out, or once they got the body checking, it was an issue and whatnot. The compete level is the same, and the kids do want to get better. They do want to get better, even at the house league level. When you have a coach, I've seen some house league coaches. So now I'm digressing. Going to Saul's point just a few moments ago about at the house league level, at the lower levels, the younger age levels, I've seen some awfully good house league coaches who got those kids to a level of compete that I never thought possible. I remember one guy in Ottawa was a terrific house league coach. He didn't want his kids had been there. He wanted no part of anything higher, and they only practiced once a week. But he did the stuff with those kids that was unbelievable. So he made them better athletes, but he made them better people because they learned to compete. They learned to be part of a team. They learned to work with each other, to help each other. And that was at a house league level, paying $600 a year to be on the ice 50 times a year. He wasn't pushing the kids. He was really working at drawing out. He used to take the kids to practices, have them line up along the glass and watch what was going on in practice and walk around to the kids. I saw him do this. And Brian would go to each kid and go, watch what that boy is doing in the corner to protect the puck. That's what we're going to try to do in our practices a little bit, even though their skill level was nowhere near what it was like. So I think that not having tryouts, now I'm going back to the tryout thing, is a structural administrative issue. And fortunately in Ontario, the spring tryout thing is a thing of the past. It's not going to happen anymore, I don't think. So there will be a certain amount of compete for maybe a couple of spots. But let's face it, in reality, in junior hockey, even in college hockey, Matt, or from my experience, back in the day, the vast majority of your spots are there. Now it's a matter of whether that kid is going to make the team and play 6 minutes, 16 minutes, or 26 minutes, because you're recruiting the kids to be on the team. They're not. The open tryout of a kid just walking on, it happens, but not very often at any level.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, if you're not having tryouts at the younger ages,
how are you how am I trying to say this? Like kids mature at different rates, physically, emotionally, mentally. If you're picking a team in the spring for the fall, how are you allowing for that growth to be accounted for? I mean, kids change immensely over 4, 5, 6 months.
Well, Bob, you're right, and that point has been made to the OHF and the GTHL ad nauseum for years, and they just don't listen. But now, with Hockey Canada's Pathways program at U9, U11, and U13 is coming down the pike as well, that the spring tryouts will no longer exist. But the problem on the girls' side is that organizations in Ontario are literally allowed to steal children to another organization at any time they want. That the tampering is rampant. Okay, so I saw this for the first time this year. I saw that for the first time this year, where in October and November, coaches were dealing with kids whose parents were taking them to go to other organizations. On the boys' side, that does not happen. Well, not much anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're deluding ourselves if we're thinking that you're coaching a bunch of peewees or 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds, and you watch them through the playoffs in March and April, and you talk to an intermediary who also has an intermediary who knows someone who runs a garage that is, your cousin's next door neighbor, and they've made an arrangement to move into your area and have had to jump 5 associations to get there. That happens. But it only happens with a couple of kids. In Ontario, on the girls' side, it's a different kind of pandemic.
Well, I think until they change the rules there, the only thing you can do is trust your culture and hope that that keeps people there, right? And there's always the grass may always be greener, but I think it's easy to point fingers and say, oh, well, they stole or took or tampered or what have you. I've always looked at it the other way. Maybe I'm not the right coach for that person. I'm certainly not the same as all the other coaches in the league. I was fortunate, I guess now that I'm hanging up the whistle for a little bit, in 13 years, I had less than 10 players ever leave who were eligible to come back. And 5 of them all were in 1 year when we were in last place. And we didn't always have the best team. So they stayed for a reason. And it wasn't because of the win-loss record. I think it's the culture. So I don't disagree with you. It's frustrating. It's, they're like vultures descending upon you. Every junior game I coach, there's the scouts, and then there's the other junior coaches watching your players so they can take them. But I think it goes back to trusting your culture and your process. Unless the OWHA or the OHF decides, there's no such thing as, picking your roster early, and you have to have true tryouts in the fall. I don't know the other possible solution, but yeah, it is, especially when you're in, downtown Toronto, and you can drive in theory to 6 different girls hockey associations within 25 minutes. It's challenging, but unfortunately it is what it is. And that's where I've always been a little jealous of the boys' side, that they have at least some kind of residency rules in place to keep players from moving all over the place.
Saul, I've got a point about what Kim's talking about and trying to connect it with pro hockey. And Richard, you had mentioned 6 minutes, 9 minutes, and you're talking the college level. And one of the issues I had is the management of the bench to build a team. And Saul, I'm relating it, everything we're talking about here is related to the professional games in terms of how you manage the bench to create a team mindset and a mentality of effort. And coaches are being fired at ridiculous rates. And we talked yesterday, Saul, about Daryl Sutter being brought in the circumstance where at that level, they're having to coach entitled players who got all that ice time. Tom, is that your dog? They got all that ice time. So you, the shortening of the bench and the NHL level and Daryl Setter's situation, it starts in minor hockey. And the fact is, kids are playing 6 minutes a game and not a balanced number of minutes, and kids are quitting a sport that can teach them things. So I equate the dilemma that Sutter is facing as having started much earlier. It's our system of entitlement and focusing on the outcome and not the development or the process. Saul, any comments?
No, I totally agree. I think at the very earliest ages, we should be giving everybody opportunities. I mean, we shouldn't be really shortening the bench. We should be trying kids playing forward, playing defense, playing different positions, playing right wing, left wing, just getting kids to understand the game, learn the game, experience the game. Everybody gets a chance. As they start to get older, then yeah, we start to, some kids are better, they play a little more. But it's that thing that, I mentioned, I think last time when I asked Pat Quinn, did he think there was too much emphasis on winning with kids too soon? And he said yes and no. Yes, if it is depriving some kids of an experience of the game, if we're only letting them play, kids 9 years old or 8 years old and he's only getting to play 6 minutes in a game, he's not going to learn the game. He's not going to love the game. But no, in the sense that, kids have to learn to win and lose and compete. And there's a lesson in that. We're not all winners every time, no matter what we do. That kind of thing is, every kid gets a trophy. There is something about competing, and some win and some learn how to come back and win the next time. But so that's one part of it. At the professional level, I used to work with the New York Mets, and Davey Johnson was the manager, and he was a brilliant guy. And Davey said, everybody on this team has to feel that they have a role. Now, maybe the role isn't what the superstar's role is, but that they have a role that is valuable to us as a group winning. And he talked about it. We have maybe some pitcher is going to come in from the 5th to the 7th inning, or the 7th to the 8th inning, give our closer a chance, but he knows he's important. He knows that he may be called on to do his role. If you do it so that people don't think that they're valued, that they don't have a role. I mean, you could be, I'd love to be a PP guy getting, 18, 19 minutes a game. But if I'm given the role that I'm a PK guy, and, they really are counting on me for really good shutdown on the PK, then at least I feel part of this thing. So if it's not, if we haven't inculcated a love of the game when they're young, then we're going to have problems later on. But yes, certainly if we're teaching kids what you had said, Wally, if we're going to help kids at the age of 12, where the kid thinks I'm a star and I expect to have all this ice and I expect everything, and that's what's happening, then yeah, they grow up and they expect it because they've had it all the way along. So, it's a balancing act. It really is. Coaching is an art form, and we've got to engage everyone and challenge everyone, and it's an art form. That's all I can say about it.
Anybody else got anything to add on that? Yeah. We've got a lot of minor hockey people on board. Al Ramsey, I'd like you to introduce yourself with Saul